is a wheel that was on the hurricane deck at the very top. And it would have been the emergency steering gear. And when we put the new roof on the boat, we had to bring it down and set it here for safekeeping.
Wow. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Okay. So now we'll go. Now, here's an interesting fact that I don't know about. These two staircases at the very aft end were not in the original drawing. And I don't know if they were added after or I just don't know. It seems a little bit odd to me that the main staircase would be the only staircase to take 3,200 people up and down. And it may be that they had the experience of taking 3,200 people up and down and it was just a nightmare, and so they added these two staircases, or it may have been a safety thing added.
Probably a safety thing.
Probably a safety thing. Now, this is what 100 years of paint looks like on a wire.
Yeah. It's quite rough, no doubt about it.
Yeah, she's in rough shape.
But at the same time, it's like you say, in good shape, considering that the frames are good. That the
she could be restored. There's one of my favorite people is an older guy named Conrad Milster, who is like one of the country's foremost experts on steam plants and steamboats, and he ran the power plant at Pratt University for many, many, many years, 60 years I think. And we brought Conrad aboard once to really get his assessment on whether this is a doable project, and his feeling was absolutely doable. There's nothing you can't replace or make. It will require money, but if we think it's worth saving an important historical civil rights artifact so as to tell the story to future generations, and also be able to tell the story of technology over 100 years, tell the story of music over 100 years,
and of thousands of years. I'm sorry, thousands of people over 100 years experiencing this boat. I mean, being in service from 1902 to 1991. There's so many people. I'm sure different celebrities here. Big bands were here. This is, I imagine
we have a great photograph of Madonna wearing a Bob Lowe Boats t-shirt, which in her early days. It would be great if we could get to Madonna and she could become the voice of Columbia.
Certainly, among many voices.
Yeah, exactly. Martha Ray was commentator to a movie that's been done about the boats, and that's kind of a fun link. I talked to Betty Levette once about her experiences on the boat. She's a blues singer, and went backstage after, and she brought her materials on the boat, and she laughed hysterically and said, "I know this boat. My first daughter was conceived on board."
Oh my God!
That way, we all laughed.
Goodness.
But people do talk about how they had their first kiss on the boats, on Columbia or St. Clair, and
it must be that Great Lakes water, you know. It goes to Niagara Falls, remember, you know. And so this,
there's some interesting things about this space. Spencer, change hands for me, please. Is this structure in the middle? I don't know what it's called, but Frank Kirby designed this.
It's like a hog frame. I believe it's like a hog frame, something like that.
And this is the first time it was used. Prior to this boat, there had to be posts every 10, 15 feet. So you couldn't have an open dance floor type space. And Kirby did tests with this material in this arch, and it was too heavy. So they cut holes out and did a test of the strength of the archways with these holes. And it turned out they were just as strong with the holes as they were without. And so this is an incredibly strong structure, but it's relatively light. And it supports the superstructure and allows for this big dance floor space to be unobstructed, which meant that, one of the things that any Detroiter that you talk to who's had experience on the boat will always mention music. They love music on the boat. And the ceiling is a replacement, and it covers up what we think would be the same kind of windows, the lead glass windows that would allow light into the dance floor.
Right.
The boat, when launched in 1902, had electricity, but it would have been, some minimal DC current probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Something
and so it wouldn't be super bright. And these little mirrored tiles, I think, are part of the 60s, 70s renovation. excavation of some sort. And I'd love to get these curved panels off to see what's behind there, because we do have Chris Hawley. You may know Chris Hawley was on board yesterday, and he's restoring an old bar near Central Terminal, and he's just had all the transom windows for that restored. He didn't replace them, he restored the original ones, and so he knows someone in Buffalo who can do that kind of work.
And this is where all the dancing was. And
this is where the dancing was. This is a subfloor, so there would have been another wooden floor that would have been like a basketball court on top, and the crew late in the night would spread sawdust and wax on the floor, so people would like give it a nice polish.
Oh, yeah.
Make their job a bit easier.
And this is all very much like what the Canadiana and the Americana had.
Very similar.
Out of Buffalo, yeah, bandstand.
This is where the original bands, the music would have been played here. In the later days, the disc jockey would have been here. We had one guy on a tour who mentioned that his family had a tradition of being in the Boblo Island, or the Boblo Boats band. And both he and his father both played in the Columbia band. And he said that Columbia had a tradition of playing Anchors Away when they left the dock for the last time for the last run of the evening, and they played Harbor Lights coming back. And he brought his trumpet along for the tour, and we were grateful that he played Anchors Away and Harbor Lights for several hours while we were giving people tours of the boat.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun. You know, people have very personal attachments to the boat. Some people have said that they can even talk to the boat, and that the boat talks back.
I believe it. I believe it.
Gloria Davis. We love Gloria.
And certainly if boats could talk, this one
Gloria
would be...
called Richard once from Detroit and said that Columbia needs you. There's something wrong. I had a dream. Columbia needs you. And he went to Detroit, and sure enough, you know, a leak had developed, which wasn't all that uncommon at the time. And he fixed it and plugged it in.
And here we have... Is it okay to be over here? Okay.
The one enclosed space on the boat, which has mahogany panel walls, and again, we do see that this around the upper edge would have been these transom windows,
you can see these.
She would have looked great when she was first built. All of the posts on the outside have been replaced. If you look at original photographs of the vessel, these square posts going from the railing to the next level were actually quite fine, beautiful spindles in the boat's first incarnation. And this square block area is where the stack and the exhaust would have come from the steam engine, and this was a mirrored panel here where the plywood is. And when we had asbestos abated, it turns out there was some asbestos in there that had to come out, so that's why that's been changed a little bit.
Hopefully you guys can see.
Yeah, the carving's quite amazing, and originally there would have been some gold gilding in there. I've got photographs I took in 2008 where they're still catching a little bit of the gold.
And the great stairway.
Originally, all of the signs for the boat were painted by hand. This is obviously a replacement that was somehow stenciled or printed. But around the boat, you'll see 3 different generations of signage. One was the painted by hand, the second was sprayed on stencils, and the third is, I don't know how they made that one, but it's newer. Steering. Columbia was launched, she was capable of traveling at 21 miles an hour, and you would use miles an hour to describe the movement of a steamboat. She didn't go that fast, very often or much. Later she would have gone much slower, but she was capable of that when she was built. So she was faster than St. Clair. A little bit bigger than St. Clair.
Did she ever participate in any boat races?
Never.
Okay.
They're all illegal. So never want to acknowledge it, but I have had conversations with people who were in the pilot house at the time of these races that didn't happen, and one friend claimed that they did manage to make 18 miles an hour, which is still pretty good, and that was in the 80s.
The old timers, certainly and famously in the Great Lakes, recall the boat race in the early 1900s between the city of Erie and the Tajmu. City of Erie of the C and B line, and Tajmu of the White Star Line, not to be confused with the White Star Line of the ocean trades. This is a different White Star Line. And they raced, and I believe the city of Erie won. Believed, yeah. The Tajmu wanted to do a revisit, but everybody politely declined, you know.
Yeah, there were some pretty magnificent boats on the Great Lakes at the time. The city of Buffalo, the city of Detroit. There were lots. Promise, Putin Bay.
The Putin Bay, and those are just the day steamers.
Yeah.
Let's wave to some of the people over here.
Yeah, we do have to be a little careful walking.
Yeah, right along the edge, along the end here. So I mean, there was a lot more people on these decks once, and it shows because the decks are pretty worn from many years.
Yeah, again, this would have been some sort of subfloor. We peeled off a lot of layers of flooring of some sorts.
Honestly, it's like tearing up one of my own ships after they get old enough.
Richard Anderson had a tradition and a ritual when he visited Detroit. At the very last time on the boat, he would want to pick a deck and sweep it, and he would ask, he would tell me, Ian, let's grab a broom and sweep the decks. And I would say, well, at least initially, I'd say, Richard, we'll come back in a few weeks, and all that crumbling paint is going to be covering the decks again. What's the point in sweeping the decks? And his answer was, we have to show the grand dame that we care.
That's right. That's right.
It was just something that he wanted to do, and we did that. We stuck with that tradition.
Even some care is better than none.
Yeah.
So up here.
So we carry on. Yep.
Cool.
Moving to the trunk deck, and the trunk deck. The main feature of the trunk deck is the beer garden.
Obviously, some.
And the beer garden was a raised area in the center of the vessel, which had limited access, and was raised up. Again, you can see this raised portion. Around the bottom of the raised portion would have been where the windows were, so that light would hit the ballroom. And when we were below, you might remember the curved ceiling, and the curved ceiling at the edges really bordering this set of windows goes around the boat.
Is it safe to go?
This is where, when you got on board, you come to the deck where you wanted to be, you'd grab your folding chairs, and you'd make yourself at home somewhere and enjoy the ride. These canvas curtains were all around the boat, and Detroit in the spring and the fall could be chilly, and so if the wind were coming from one particular direction, they could lower the curtains and reduce the amount of wind coming on board and making it a little more comfortable for people.
Oh, these floors regret me putting on those extra pesky 10 pounds.
Yeah, I tell people when I bring them on the boat that we have to socially distance, not for any health reason, but to space out our weight on the decks. It's pretty solid in the center. And,
for those watching this, they can go to knowyourships.com or my Facebook page at Justin Higner to, among other places, to be able to see some pictures we're going to take of this boat, because on the film here it might be just a little dark for people to really see. So I'm going to take some flash photography of some of the details here, so you guys can really appreciate it.
Fun.
A little better.
Something fun that I only noticed on my last trip to the boat. I saw this and I thought, wonder what that is. It wouldn't be an ashtray. It's way too small. So I opened it up and I pulled this chain out. And look at that, it's a key. It's a watchman's key. So a watchman would have had to come around the boat, use this key to log that he'd been here. It would record when he used this key in his clock to prove that he was standing in this place when the key was turned, and then he would go to the next station and log his having checked out the next part of the
and
boat.
it's still here, attached to the chain.
Still here after all these years.
We'll take a picture of that in a
There,
bit. Yeah.
there it is. I thought that was quite fun. There are a
flash.
couple of voice tubes that are more forward. That I should point out.
Well, I got to speak into one of those. You never know what they'll say.
You might get a message back. And again, on the top here, this would all have been windows. So I have a feeling that when she was launched and went into service,
This area here.
yes, exactly,
There.
it would have felt like the Crystal Palace going through the water with all its glass windows and light coming in. It must have been a really interesting experience. And this heavy paint on this wire mesh fencing would not have been so ponderous.
Encrusted like this.
Encrusted
Yeah.
like that. It would have been very light and airy. And this was the deck we think that that Sarah Elizabeth Ray was removed from. Sarah reports that she was on the top deck when she was removed, and we don't have any proof of whether that's the hurricane deck above us, that she was outside, or whether she was on this deck. And it depends on how one interprets the wording. I was on the top deck.
Was she, by the way, was she aware that she might be in trouble if she, as a colored person, boarded this boat?
I don't know. She must have known the history of the line, though, because I don't think she was the first person who tried to get on board who didn't fit the profile that the operator wanted.
Certainly.
To,
Almost certainly, yeah.
Coleman Young, the first black mayor of Detroit, was removed when his Boy Scout troop came for a ride, and he didn't even get on. He wasn't even able to get on. Sarah's uniqueness here is that she managed to get by the ticket takers, and she didn't have to buy a ticket because her teacher bought the ticket, and whoever was taking the tickets didn't object enough to prevent her from coming on board. And so it was a sort of, it was a defined act to go find Sarah, find the young black girl, and get her off the boat. I mean, that...
It's interesting how someone might have been tipped off one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody must have said something.
And here we have some of the window examples right here.
Yeah, I think these would be replacements because they
Right.
look very interesting. But it does show us where the windows would have been all around the vessel.
And here we are, folks, in Silo City. This is an historic area of the city of Buffalo, a magnificent place with massive temple-like structures that carried a great deal of the product that went across the Great Lakes routinely. In fact, the grain elevator as we know it was developed here by a man named Joseph Dart, and his invention would have been further down the Buffalo River and the older section of town closer to the harbor mouth, and we're talking
1905 was the first poured concrete.
Right, 1905, yeah. For concrete.
There were grain elevators before that, obviously, but they were often wooden structures, and they had a tendency to explode.
They had a tendency to explode, and Dart's was one of them. I think his went up in the 1860s, if I'm correct, but comment below if you have the exact year. I don't have it on me, but Joseph Dart is one of the main reasons why we have the grain elevator system all over the Great Lakes and much of the world, because of that basic methodology was carried over into places like this. And now this is a favorite destination for exhibits and talks, like the one we're doing now, fishing, kayaking, and other different great activities. We've got a bar and a restaurant here, which you should all definitely check out near here.
The attention to detail in these beams, that lovely curve.
Yes. Oh,
This
yes.
is gorgeous.
This is a kind of industrial elegance, a craftsmanship. This was the Edwardian age, of course. This is the age of empire. This is the age of real invention. Most people didn't even have cars yet.
Right.
And the electricity was brand new to most people yet.
Yeah. So imagine 1902, you got on board and there was electricity. That would have been kind of a thrill. You would have probably arrived at the boat by public transit, because public transit in Detroit at the time was spectacular, as it was in Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
And we only destroyed it years later.
And this is just a day boat, of course. We're not even we haven't quite talked about the overnight ships, which were literally floating palaces essentially on the Great Lakes, no different practically than the ocean liners were operating at the time. Ships were the way to go for most people of the world yet, and the Great Lakes was no exception. The roads weren't as good yet. They didn't have trucks in the same way, so freight and passenger services were very different on the Great Lakes, and they traveled all over in this way, and many people spent their honeymoons aboard overnight versions of this ship in great style, and they wrote back accordingly, talking about how they appreciated the service on their way to Niagara Falls and Buffalo, and vice versa.
Chris, my friend Chris told a story yesterday when we were aboard about how his parents or his grandparents, I forget, relatives, ancestors, met on board Canadiana. And he said that his father tended to be a little bit shy, and his mother was more outgoing, and his mother spotted this good-looking wallflower man standing at the edge and approached him and asked if he would dance, and apparently he said no, and she wasn't going to take no for an answer, and they hit it off, and now we have Chris Hawley.
Fantastic, yeah. Also, special thanks to our sponsor of this video series, these shoes, folks. Holy
That's crazy.
moly. Tell me that's not real cowhide. And, if it is, that's okay.
It isn't. It's made out of rice
sorta.
husks.
Okay.
Believe it or not. It's a
I cannot continue
rice
unless I say
husk
something
shoes.
about those, yeah.
shoes.
Those are awesome.
So what we're going to do now is we'll walk back to the forward. We'll walk forward again, and we'll
Okay.
walk up one more deck, and we'll
Great.
go onto the hurricane deck, which is the top of the boat.
Sweet, and that will be for part 3
Yeah.
of our awesome story. And your name, sir, again?
I'm Ian Danic, and this is Spencer, and this is Tucker. We had no idea we were filming today, or these guys would probably have stayed at home, although they're photogenic. Hey, Tucker,
Absolutely.
show us your big wings. There you go. Look at that. What a good boat. You're the best.
And 2 of the more interesting passengers, special guests. Special guests indeed. We got a cabin for you.
Allowed on Columbia, I think, in the early days.
There we go. So, and the passengers back then would have enjoyed them, I'm sure.
Yeah.